College football is rolling, and that means you need the best in the industry to come on and discuss another huge weekend in football. I'm very excited. Welcome back, Mr. Ralph Michaels from Wagertalk to the Odds Breakers. You can follow Ralph on Twitter at CalSportsLV. Ralph, thanks so much for coming back on the show, my man. We are week 3 already. It's almost like the season's just blowing by, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah, we see more and more conference games now. So an exciting time when you see these SEC and ACTC teams matched up. So looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. It's a completely different story with conference. You can have teams that were just good at the non-conference and they just go back to kind of what they were. I think Maryland's done that to us a few times over the years, trying to trick us and pretend they were really Big Ten contenders from time to time. But you got to sniff that out, and that's what you're so great at doing. And we do have a couple conference games, and hopefully we can get into a few of those. I'm very excited for that. But, before we get into that, we didn't get a chance to do our future bets. We were both very busy. Chris was very busy. So, off the top of your head, do you have any future bets going that you took in that you like or dislike for the college football 2023?
Well, my top 2 were Louisville to win the MAC, their division in the MAC. Toledo to win their division in the MAC, and Louisville over 7 wins. The Louisville I bet early at -148. It actually went to 8 wins. So, I got a great number on them. Obviously, their win against Georgia Tech wasn't great, and their Murray State win, we don't know what to take of it. I think they handle Indiana this weekend at Boston College. So off to a nice start. The one that I'm certainly glad I missed Kiev, and not only for me is it the most shocking thing in sports. Really the sports world is what Sanders has done at Colorado, and the way his son has looked. I meant to bet the under right when it come out. It moved so fast that I decided to not bet it. But we may talk about them a little later, but I have never moved a team 10 points in my power ratings after 2 games. And realistically, I would have moved them 16 points. But I have a rule that I will not move a team no matter how far I am off more than 5 points each week, just to make sure I'm not overreacting. But again, I was 15 points wrong on the Colorado Buffaloes, as a lot of people were.
So Ralph, you and I and other cappers that's been around a long time, we know that. An adjustment of 5 points is massive, and that means you're massively off, which is almost like you feel bad about that almost. But what I did say about Colorado, as I said, I just don't think we knew where to start them. And that's the truth. We just didn't know where to start them. Nobody did. And then people try to feed off each other information. We knew what happens normally when there's a new coach and a new team. And he bucked all the trends. And I moved him 13 points, buddy. That was after week 1. I think I moved him an extra 3 or 4 after last week. So just to catch up, they are absolutely amazing. But now, I find myself being a DN fan. I tried to not like him and it didn't work. He's just got too much positive energy around him, and he's just too exciting to hate, and the fact that everyone was against him in our community makes me almost like him more.
Well, yeah, and let's remember, he did fine at Jackson State. He had a 10-2 team. His son was recruited by many Power 5 teams, and played at Jackson State last year. And then Travis Hunter, put his name in the Heisman right now, playing both ways. He had 90 plays played against TCU, which was amazing because he was still the best offensive receiver and the best defender on the field. So that's a 5-star recruit that played at Jackson State. So he didn't get all the hype that he should have. So again, you make what you make. He has completely changed the way the transfer portal will be forever looked at. And I think it opened up a lot of coaches. And, beating TCU is one thing, but, having the OC that they did from Kent State and playing at the pace of play that they played and not having mistakes playing that fast was the most amazing thing for me. No offensive line penalties. The guys were set where they knew how to be set. To get all that together and look as good as they did fundamentally shocked me more than winning and then beating Nebraska as well last week.
Absolutely. They're rather buttoned up now. There was mistakes, but Shedeur Sanders just was able to overcome them. You did see some maybe a missed assignment block or a penalty, but it wasn't nearly as much as I expected. I expected more mistakes. I expected more penalties. I probably, if you would have set the over under a number of penalties, 12, 13, I probably would have went under or over and lost it. You know, it was just one of those situations where they look much better. And you look at these college teams that's been around a long time, they're making more mistakes. So massive credit to Deion Sanders and Hunter. I mean, this is absolutely preposterous to say, but could we get another baseball situation with a guy playing both offense and defense, like the Shohei Ohtani with Hunter coming in the NFL? I mean, that can't happen in my brain, but it would be exciting if something like that would come to fruition.
Yeah, you know, I think if he's talented enough, again, I'm not a good college scout. I can't say this. I don't know if he's a better receiver or better DB, but I think that there's some NFL coaches that would let him play DB and use him as a fourth receiver at times. You know, it just depends on how your team is set. The NFL is likely not going to do that because the physicality and the number of plays you take. But I could see them having a package or several packages for him, at least on one side of the ball, where he's not playing both positions straight up, but, you know, full offense or full defense, and maybe being in 15 or 20% of the plays for the other. You know, if you got a talent and the guy wants to do it and he's physically proved that he can do it in college football for several years, why not?
Well, that's very true. And thinking back, I'm pretty sure Deion had a few of those packages when in his days, especially with the Cowboys. I'm not sure so much with the Niners, but he definitely did with the Cowboys. And that was fun to watch. So we'll see what kind of brews up from Colorado. But I guess that leads me to my next question. What is your biggest surprise so far for college football 2023? And I think we might have mentioned it with Colorado, but if we already did, then let's go to another one.
Yeah, you know, Colorado clearly is. You know, again, I've never seen a situation like that. Houston to me is one of them. The fall off of the Houston Cougars, watching them, and yes, they won. They beat UTSA in the opener, but that was because UTSA quarterback threw 3 horrible picks. Should have never even been in that game. I did play against them last week, you know, and cashed with the Rice game, a game they lost in multiple overtimes. But, you know, I'm accustomed to seeing Houston play good defense. And, you know, hell, they're allowing 450 yards per game to UTSA and Rice, 2 teams. Imagine what happens when they have TCU this week and then they go to Texas Tech and play West Virginia, Texas, Kansas State, and Baylor, and they're up to the Big Ten. So to me, Houston is a big fade team. Hopefully we get a few more weeks of line value where people perceive Houston as a better team that's 1-1. And even if they lose to TCU and beat Sam Houston, that puts them at 2-2 when they travel to Texas Tech. So I have Houston down as much as most teams from where I had them at the start of the year.
No doubt. And that makes, I mean, there's quite a few of them. Houston's a great pick for that. And I had to downgrade him as well. It's funny you mentioned Baylor because I was kind of thinking that one maybe too. I could not believe they lost to Texas State that first game, and they blew it against Utah without the quarterback. And man, I had a personal play on Baylor last week. I thought it was just a sneaky spot for them, and it pushed at 7. And there was 7.5, but I just kind of took it late. I was like, you know what? I should have took this earlier. I thought to myself, I'm like, I'm going to do a personal play, tweet it out, but I ended up pushing. Bad beat, most likely. They're up 7 with a couple minutes left. But, you know, they're still kind of I thought Dave Aranda's team was going to be more trajectory up, especially his first year, and instead of trajectory down. So I guess I could pick Baylor as well. But you can say Clemson's been underwhelming. You could say that even Alabama and Georgia are a little bit underwhelming right now. So there's all kinds of little stuff popping up. But I think it really makes for a great story this year. Wouldn't it be great to see like Notre Dame, FSU, Texas,
USC? You want USC in there?
And why not? Throw them in there too. It'd be fun to see a completely different playoff scenario. I doubt that happens because Georgia's schedule, but it would be fun to see. It's early. Whatever we talk now, you could see these teams lose later too. So it's fun to watch, and that's why we love college football. But leading from that question, I'm kind of curious what kind of trends might have caught your eye for this season. Well, at least coming into week 3, because week 3 is kind of weird. There's some conference games. There's not. What's really funny, Ralph, is there's no teams that are ranked playing each other. Now we don't care. We're sports bettors, right? We're getting the same field. We could bet on UMass versus UConn and be fine with it, right? But, just from a general perspective, if you're just a fan of college football, it might be one of those weekends that you do some yard work. For me, I'll be watching the games, but there's got to be some trends or something that you found.
Well, Kiev, I want to talk about this, and I'll tweet this chart out later today. This is updated through this week. You can't watch a college football game without the announcer saying, well, there's so many fewer plays this year and the clock doesn't stop, with the exception of 2 minutes of the half and the 2 minutes in the first warning. I went through the last 5 seasons looking at the first 2 weeks of games, week 0, week 1, and week 2. I didn't include the COVID season because there were so many unique teams playing games 1 or 2. But points per game so far this year, 54.5. Last year, 56.1. 2 years ago, 54.5, the exact same number. 3 years ago, 55.8. And 4 years ago, 56.4. So we're only 1.3 points per game fewer than the highest number in the previous 5 years. Average total has come down. Vegas has made adjustments, thinking fewer plays, fewer series. The average totals come down to 53.9. The previous 4 seasons, 56.1, 56.5, 57, and 58. So while the points per game were almost the same, we've seen a drop of the total of 4.1 points per game from 4 years ago. Plays per game, 66.2 this year. Last year, 67.8. 2 years ago, 67.5. So many coaches were saying, oh my God, we're going to get 1 or 2, or there's going to be 3 less series per game. There's only been 1.6 plays per game per team, fewer than last year, and 1.3 plays per game fewer than 2 years ago. So last year in college football, if you bet every over-under game, 47% went over, 53 under. 2 years ago, 42% went over, 58% under. This year, points per game are close. Average total is far different with over 4 points per off. So far this year, 50.6% of the games have gone over the total. So I think we're going to start seeing this with conference play. It's going to affect you more in conference play because there's familiarity, because coaches aren't going to run the ball as fast. They're going to try to be more conservative. So while it started at a 56%, one of the things I look at, I will talk about Florida and Tennessee more. I really love playing unders when you had teams that scored very well in non-conference games, because the Vegas totals are based on what teams did this year. But it's a completely different mindset and game plan when you're playing those first conference games of the season. So to me, I'll be looking at playing unders in these type of situations.
Wow. So conference plays when you plan on firing. I love it because it makes me feel a little better, because I said that I think the book's slightly over adjusted. I was more around the 2, and I said 2 to 3 range, but you said it's 4.1, which is interesting. It makes me think maybe it's almost bad luck that the overs are only 50.6. I almost think that the over should be 52% or 53% if the points were that much off. But, that's obviously the sample size is not that great, being that it's 1 year. We're curious to see how the first 3 games go every year after this, and where the books actually do adjust it. So you wonder if they take it down a little bit as well. But no, conference play, great time to start looking at some of those over-unders and maybe lean to the under, especially if some of these teams are just going to run the clock out now a little bit easier, as we've seen happen many times in the past with the clock stopping on first down. So love it. What else you got for me? I know you got more, Ralph.
Yeah, I was doing some trends and angles looking at some college football situations. So this is not a game 2 specific, but this is just how teams do as a dog off a loss as a double-digit favorite. So obviously, if you lose as a double-digit favorite, do you think that team is superior and bounces back? Or do you think that carries over to the next week? Well, there are two teams it applies to this year. Buffalo is off a double-digit loss, and they're playing Liberty, and North Texas is off a double-digit loss, and they're playing Louisiana Tech. Those teams going back since 2019 that are off a double-digit loss and are now a dog have gone 40.3% against the spread. So basically a 60% system that's been valid for over the last 4 years with a very solid sample size. It's a fade play. So this system, again, I don't have an opinion on either game, but this situation says to fade Buffalo and fade North Texas. Then I took it one step further. You know, this past week, Kiev, we had 3 teams lose to the FCS: Buffalo, Northern Illinois, and Nevada. Now, FCS upsets used to happen much more infrequently, but we've seen the quality of play in the FCS get much better. I mean, the Missouri Valley Conference, I would say, is better than the MAC, you know, as far as FCS football goes. We see people like Hunter, a 5-star recruit, go play at Jackson State with Deion Sanders. So they're getting many more situations. But this goes all the way back since 2017, when a team like Buffalo, Northern Illinois, and Nevada lose to an FCS team. The next game, they have only gone 37.8% against the spread. So a 62.2% fade. If you're going to lose to an FCS team, there has been a negative carryover. And one more I'll give you. I wanted to look at how teams do by conference. And we know, even though the SEC struggled last week, you know, as far as some of their non-conference games, and we saw some teams fall, when an SEC team since 2017 loses a game as a favorite of 7 or more, like Alabama did, some people had the line at 6, some people had it at 7. It was in the database. SEC teams are 68.3% the game after losing a game as a favorite by 7 or more. So while generally we talked about teams off a double-digit loss as a favorite, that number would even be worse if I took the SEC teams out of it that are a positive. So again, just some situations to look at. You never want to base a selection on a trend or an angle, but it's great to put a check mark either on the team you're looking for or against you to look at all the positives and negatives when you're looking at trends and angles. And then you start looking at matchups, and then you start looking at situational handicapping, and then looking at technical data with stats. Just a piece of the puzzle when you're handicapping.
It certainly is. And it's pay dividends for people that do it right. Just like you mentioned, use it as a part of the function to, you know, either put you on or off of a play. You know, I feel bad for South Florida. May they rest in peace, facing Alabama coming up this week. What you said about Buffalo really kicks me because I'm a Badger fan, as you know, and, you know, the Badgers are saying, the fans are saying, oh, Buffalo's probably a pretty good team after we didn't cover against them. And okay, lo and behold, we lose to Washington State and Buffalo loses outright to an FCS team. So you can imagine how loud I was on my little Badger group about that. But just another reason to fade old Buffalo coming on in. And obviously any other team, like you mentioned, that lost this badly to an FCS team. That is some great stuff. So for more stats, make sure you follow Ralph at Cal Sports Las Vegas, or LV for Las Vegas. Let's get into some games then, my man. And we picked a few of them. I picked 3, you picked 2. We can do a little hodgepodge after. I have a couple plays, but I'm going to talk Illinois plus 14.5 versus Penn State. That's what the spread is. It used to be 15. It kind of trickled down a little bit. Total's around 48.5 for this game. Now, I looked at this game, and it's funny that people start talking about metrics and stats. It's too early for that, especially when some of these schedules are way out of whack, you know. So what we do, we go by power ratings. We go by our power ratings. We go by spots, overreaction, systems, as you mentioned before, weather, whatever else we can bring. But I just like how Brett Bielema knew how to play this Penn State team back in 21, and he had nobody in 21. He kind of had his good team last year, and he lost some people. But they went outright in Happy Valley. But the way they did it is that they really muddied up the game. They slowed it down, ran the ball, and kind of that's really the way a lot of teams win against better teams. You know, just frustrate them. They're not in the rhythm because they're not out there. Well, Brett Bielema knows how to do that. Now, he couldn't do it last week against a great coach in Lance Leopold. Hoping my 35-1 in the Big 12 lasted a little bit longer this year, but it'd be nice to see Kansas in that game. But Penn State's numbers look good. They've played nobody, literally nobody. Jeff Sagarin says Illinois has played the 24th hardest schedule so far, while Penn State has played the 120th hardest schedule. That doesn't bode well for West Virginia, but if you remember, Coach was complaining that Franklin did run up the score just to cover. That's the only scare I have playing against Franklin. But coming into Illinois looked really bad last week against Kansas. These kids are going to be motivated. Penn State, not sure what they're feeling right now, but they haven't played anybody. My power rankings have this about 12.5, so I'm still taking Illinois here at plus 14.5 for a couple stars, and that will be my play I'm giving out for this game. Any agreement, disagreement, or thoughts on this game, Ralph?
I have a slight disagreement with you. Penn State has been clean. They played West Virginia at home, so it was a good opener. Now, granted, Delaware is going to pull your schedule down, and they did what they had to do, so the stats are very misleading. But I just don't feel comfortable with Illinois. I think Penn State isn't getting priced properly. This is a rare case. Normally, I hate the AP polls because they just take who wins and moves them up. But I think they actually did the right thing, moving Penn State up and dropping Ohio State down because of the eye test, because Drew Aller has been a better quarterback than the Ohio State guys, and he finally named who his starter is. But to me, Illinois played Toledo at home, back and forth game, pulled out the win. Kansas, they rushed 5 for 5.0 yards per carry, but they allowed 8 sacks. I really like this Penn State defense, who had 3 sacks against West Virginia, 4 sacks against Delaware. Altmaier, again, 68.5% against weak secondaries and back sevens, where this Penn State scares me. So I lean Penn State, disagree with you a little bit, but I won't have my money on it, so good luck to you, Kiev.
Well, thank you. I mean, the under's not a bad look either. I was looking at the under. And if it's true that this Penn State defense is going to travel and shut down Illinois, which very much might happen, then you look towards the under. But the under is going down. You have a dog of 14.5 or higher. Anything under 50, you got to slightly consider that as maybe looking towards the dog just in general. But nope, that's little disagreements. Good. Let's move on to Tennessee versus Florida. Florida plus 6.5. The total's 58.5. Now, not sure if you have a play on this or a lean, but I do. But I'm letting you go first to see if there's any disagreement, Ralph.
I have not finalized my college football card, but for this show, I definitely have a play. And it's either on under 58 or under 28.5 for the first half. I haven't decided which way I've gone. And I'll tell you what, I've had success so far this year. While I talked about the plays per game not being down so much and the scoring being up, I think we're going to start seeing a big difference between those running teams, the option teams, the run-heavy teams, where we're going to see more unders, and I think there's some value in this game. Now, this is the one game I talked about, and I prefaced earlier talking about Tennessee's offense, 499 yards against Virginia in a neutral setting, 456 yards against Austin Peay. Well, they emptied a bench against Austin Peay, and they could have had a lot more. So Vegas is making a number based on their 49 points and their 30 points scored. But the Virginia game, remember, Virginia shortened their season last year because of the tragedy on campus. They didn't play their last few games, and they come in and they have a home game on deck, and they're playing in an NFL stadium. So Tennessee fans are excited, and it helps them. I really like this Tennessee defense. People talk about their offense. I don't think Milton now has to play on the road. That wasn't a neutral game again, like I said, against Virginia. I think Milton struggles on the road. This Tennessee team, let's remember, they are 2-16 against Florida the last 18 years, and they have not won in the swamp since 2001. So you have to overcome those type of things. Coach is going to say, oh, those don't matter, different teams, different years. But it does. Those players know. So I think they start off slow. As far as Florida goes, we all remember they lost 24-11 against Utah and looked crappy. Utah without their starting quarterback. They still held Utah to 270 yards, and they lost that game because of special teams and because of turnovers. So you have Graham Mertz. We know he's not going to throw the ball very much. At least they're not going to want to. They ran 51 times against McNeese State. They passed the ball 23 times. They had to throw against Utah because they got down so early and so big. So I think Florida keeps it close, has a conservative game plan. I think Tennessee doesn't want to expose Milton too much on his first true road start in an SEC opponent. They run the ball early. So most of my unders for the next few weeks, I'll be using first halves. I did that well this past week, had 2 winners losing first half. And just to throw out a frustrating game that you said, Kiev, I've lost 2 total plays this year. The one was on Penn State scoring with their backups with 1 second to go on the last play of the game.
Brutal.
The other was Syracuse and Western Michigan, who had 52 points in the first half. Syracuse pulled their entire squad and didn't score in the second half. So that's the way to get pissed off, losing 2 overs so far this year.
I totally get it. It is, and that's bad beats. And we're going to get that all the time. But unfortunately, I went with the over. And Ralph, here, I took 57.5 and it went to 58.5. Okay. So it's not like I have this massive line value here. And there's probably reason why it's not jacking up right now. It's kind of hovering there. I checked the weather. I mean, it's supposed to rain in Florida on Sunday, but it right now it's holding up now. The last game did go over. It was scored into the high 60s or early or 70s. You got to remember that you've got to throw some of the older stuff away without the Josh Heupel. But I just feel that Tennessee is going to get their points. I just don't know how good their defense really is. I know that they played Virginia, and Virginia's offense really doesn't do it for me. They scored a little bit against James Madison, which was good for them. But they had a backup quarterback in, of course, during that game. But like you said, Austin Peay. And their offense really looked ugly that first half. Last week, it took them a while. They scored 13 points in the first half last week. And there's concerns for Milton. And this isn't a max play for me. But one thing that catches my eye, it's that the speed of Tennessee. I mean, they just play ridiculously fast. I'll share my screen here. I got a nice little database. Their tempo is number 1 in the country. And that's saying a lot against a lot of those scrubs that they played. And the fact that, they weren't really in a shootout in their first game, 19.13 seconds per play. Now, Florida's a bit slower at 29.39, but my thought process is that maybe Florida's going to have to keep up. And Graham Mertz, God, he threw the ball 37, 40 times in that game versus Utah. Why is Napier going to be different? I'm sure he doesn't want to be different, but he might be in a situation where he has to be different. I just thought this was a little bit low for a team that plays so fast. Now, the question is, whoever's going to dictate the pace is going to win this bet for either you or me. But it's interesting that you have the under, and I'm definitely, whenever you say something like that, I definitely get a little bit concerned, Ralph. So we'll see.
Well, Kiev, again, remember, I said first half. So it's, and part of the reason for the first half is this. If Florida does get down and have to start throwing the ball, that does pick up the pace. So like I said, if I'm using unders, it's likely first half. I do have one more stat. If anyone is on the Florida side, let's remember that Billy Napier, as a dog, he is now 15-4 and 1 ATS at ULL in Florida as a dog. So he knows how to shrink a game. When he's an underdog, he has his team prepared and ready. And that includes that Utah loss that wasn't good. So Billy Napier, one of the best underdog coaches in college football.
All right. Well, I don't disagree with that. He has been a good underdog coach. He just hasn't done anything in Florida yet. So we'll see. Hopefully, Graham Mertz, to be honest with you, I want him to succeed after how he failed as a Badger. I felt bad for him. The kid had the yips. I want him to succeed and hopefully do something good this season. So next game I picked was Florida State versus Boston College. And I wrote this down this morning, I think, plus 25.5, totals at 49. I can check our Betfred odds screen just to see if Florida State is still there. Yeah, it's 26 on Betfred odds, and the total's at 48. Now, this is a low total, and there's reasons for it. And I was actually shocked to see when I checked the weather on this one, man, because it says 25-mile-per-hour winds. I'm like, really? Like, what other games are going way up there in Boston, right? In that area. So that explains a lot of things, because there was movement on this, Ralph. It was at 28, 29, and it kind of moved all the way down to 25 and a half, 26. But this is an interesting game to discuss, because Boston College has looked so terrible so far. The Eagles are negative 0.22 yards per play against Holy Cross in Northern Illinois. I mean, you can't get any worse than that, man. I think I might have taken their over, too. I'm really sweating that one. I think they got the W against one of those, but that thing's toast. But Florida State looked almost perfect so far. Little slow start after their letdown last week, but they ended up getting going. Now that conference play is starting, things do get a bit dicey, and this line's crashing because of the wind. And the fact, maybe it's because they have Florida State on deck. Now, I'm not or Clemson on deck. Clemson, Florida State's the next game. So that's going to be a big game for next week. So you wonder how vanilla this team's going to be at the end. And maybe they get backdoored at the end because of, not trying to show their full playbook. Now, I would guess that they showed a lot of versus LSU, but still, this is a coaching philosophy that maybe they don't want to hurt their guys. Kind of prepare for the big game if they have Boston College in their sights. My number on this, Ralph, is minus 29. So I'm not taking it. I explain the reasons why I'm not. I could see Boston College being inside here. Probably not touching it, but I'll tell you this: it's beauty versus ugliness, and it's so fun to see the ugliness win. Sometimes I don't think it's going to happen this time, but I wanted to talk about the spots in this game, Ralph.
Well, I'm not going to bet Boston College. This is what hurricane is, or whatever the hurricane is. That's why the winds are there. And this really, it's not near the coast, but that's how strong the hurricane is to carry those winds out. This is a noon game, and I thought about playing the under because of the wind, because that will affect it. But you don't get a real accurate hour-per-hour forecast this quick in advance. So I'll leave it with leaning to the under. The only team I play is Florida State, but I'm not playing it because you mentioned it, the situation. This is their first true road game. The beating against LSU was in Orlando, so they had the fan base. You're now playing on the road at Boston College. So you have Jordan Travis, who's only completing 63%. He was only 18 of 32 against Southern Miss. They ran for 300 yards and 8.3 yards per carry. And they're not going to do that against BC. Yes, BC is a crappy team, but it's still a division, a conference foe. One of the differences between Florida State of the past and this year is they always knew they were second fiddle. So when they had Clemson on deck, they knew they had to take care of business and then get to Clemson. This year, they actually have the bullseye on their back. And these are 20-year-old kids. There's no way in hell you can't say, well, shit, Clemson lost to Duke. We beat Boston College. If we beat Clemson next week, we're basically in the ACC championship because Clemson will have 2 conference losses. So I've had Florida State high. I actually had them higher than Clemson in my preseason ratings. If I was going to play this game, as I said, I'll look at the hour for hour and lean with the under because if there is a lot of wind, Mike Norvell is not going to have his team throw the ball. He's going to be happy running the ball, getting out of Dodge with a win, not caring about covering the point spread. But I would like to play, instead of the full game, in the first half, 14.5 is the total. I'm not worried about that half hook in the first half. I'm okay laying it with a team like Florida State that I think can easily jump out to a 21 or 28 point lead and then relax their guys, and Boston College may have some putback. I do want to mention, you talked about them losing to Northern Illinois. The team they beat, Holy Cross, last week is an excellent FCS team. I think they lost to North Dakota State in the finals last year. They were undefeated. So they are an elite team this year. So the loss isn't as bad as that. But yeah, they allowed 264 yards and 6.8 yards per carry against them. So let's see. FSU rushed for 308.3. Boston College allowed 264, 6.8. Jordan Travis may not throw the ball all game.
I wouldn't. I will throw it. Why bother, man? Take them out in the second half. Yeah, holy cross. My sister played hockey there, so I'm really nice to see their success here at the lower levels, my man. But they just went to Division One right when she was in there, like 15 years ago or whatever it was. But man, now it's just an interesting game to talk about because you can just see all of a sudden Boston College beats Florida State. What is going on? I just remember when Syracuse beat Clemson. It's kind of like the same feeling, but this might be worse if this happens. But it's college football. These kids have emotions. Teams get momentum. Kids play out of their minds while the other ones are just stuck and trying to adjust. This happens, but this is why we talk about it. Let's get into the best bet portion then, my man. And I'll go first with mine. And I'm looking at a game that really was a head scratcher for me. I seen Kansas State versus Missouri, and Kansas State was laying about 3.5 and open. The totals was 48. Now, this went to 5, and on our Betfred odds screen, it looks like still at 5 here with a total of 48. But man, I have no idea what makes people think that this should be such a low spread in this situation, man. I mean, I watched this game last year, and I'm pretty sure Kansas State still has the same quarterback there. Missouri went there and they got beat 40-12. It wasn't really a game. This year, Missouri looks almost as bad as Boston College, maybe. They really struggled against Tennessee State. Now, maybe they're being vanilla for this game. I don't know. That's always hearsay, unless you really know the playbook and you really know the coach's tendencies. If you're a fan of that team, then maybe you can tell me if they were vanilla on purpose for whatever reason. But Middle Tennessee State is nothing to get excited about. This year, what changed to me? I have to ask myself, what changed to me here? You have a great coach, a top 3 Big 12 team against the bottom of the barrel type. Well, let's not go that far, but Vanderbilt, I guess, would still be there, but they are not a good SEC team. And my power ratings, I'm sorry, have this at like 10 to 11 points still. I am shocked it's still less than 7. This is my best bet. Kansas State -4.5 for 3 stars. You tell me where I'm wrong, buddy.
I'm looking right now. I have Kansas State a 16, and I have Missouri a 23. So I have it at 5. But I don't disagree. I mean, I have it at 5, but I lean Missouri, and I don't change my power ratings for small injuries. If someone's out for the year, I do. And again, I am conservative, making adjustments early if you still beat the team. But if you read the Columbia newspapers, I don't care if he's playing vanilla or not. They're not happy with this offense at all. I mean, Eli kept talking to us on how much this offense is going to be improved. And, when you look at the numbers and you say, oh, Brady Cook has completed 77.5% and he hasn't thrown an interception, that sounds like a pretty good team. But, they were sacked 4 times against Middle Tennessee. That's a scary thing to now be playing a Kansas State team that is allowing 2 foes. Granted, Troy and Southeast Missouri State, but Troy was a good team. I mean, they were laying 15.5 against Troy and they win by 29. But when you have a Kansas State team that's allowing 38 yards per game rushing, 1.4 yards per carry, and has 4 sacks in the 2 games with opponents that aren't truly pass-heavy teams, I could only go one way. And you have the better coach, you have the better quarterback, I think you have the better defense. So I'm not really sure. It's funny, Kiev, when you go through your games and you start breaking them down, and I start marking the ones I like to look at it deeper. For some reason, this didn't make it into that mix. But talking to you, you might have me bring it back in and look at it a little closer. And, for people that don't know, even though we handicap for a living, you're not going to do the same work on all 50 games each week or 60 games when there's times. So you look at what your power rating numbers say. You start looking at situations, and I don't know how many you, Kiev, I usually take 18 to 20 games in the mix that I start doing the heavy reading on and moving forward. Again, I didn't have this one in the mix, but I might pull it back in. So we'll see about that.
About same for me. It's an ongoing process. We start right away on Sunday even. I do my power ratings on Sunday morning, and I just look at every single box score, and I do a misleading score analysis that we publish over at the website. And, it all starts there really. And then, obviously you cap off some quick lines in the beginning because you don't have a ton of time to do the analysis. You just check any injuries there or anything. Power rank's way off. I'm going to do this, see if it's worth a give out. And then later, Monday, you're doing more and more research. You get up to 20, 25 games you pick out of the full slate of 60 some games. So same process, but I just could not find a reason. Sometimes as coaches just know how to play other teams. And in this situation, Kleiman is just a fantastic coach, and UCF on deck. It's not like they have someone big on deck. It's just they come from Troy. They want to beat the SEC team. They're now thinking to themselves, TCU got all the accolades. We beat them last year. Let's show who's the real king of the Big 12 and possibly get in the playoffs. That's their mindset, Ralph.
For any new handicappers out there, I mean, we talk about this in the NFL, and I do this in college football. Maybe that's why I didn't have this game in here, is that I make my lines a full week in advance. So I don't want to overreact to last week's games. Obviously, if there's a team like Colorado, you have to overreact huge. But, like those NFL look-ahead lines that move 2 or 3 or 4 points because of a Monday night performance, the same thing holds true. We just don't have the NFL look-ahead lines to do it. But, my advice to you is make your lines 2 weeks in advance, go through the games, take a look at what they are, and then see what the difference is from where you made the lines and see if that overreaction was legitimate. Did a team get blasted? Did they have a bunch of group injuries during the game? Was this was this a flat spot because of look ahead? So looking back at what my number was 2 weeks ago, I didn't have the number high enough, so I didn't throw it in the mix. But there's times that even though the number's not as good, you don't want to underreact either, especially if you watch the team play. It's different for me. I changed my power ratings and I'm conservative early in the year. Unless I had the eye test and watched that entire game, then I'm apt to move it more because I'm not basing it on a box score.
All right. No, it sounds great. And that's just the process that everyone should be following. I love the fact you make your lines earlier. I don't quite take that step. I know I do look at them though, because sometimes I will bet an overhead, a look ahead line, especially in the NFL where there's just so much easier to do. But if I'm already on the team that I'm kind of expecting to win, I might be like, well, they're going to get a bump up here. I might want to take them next week or fade a team. If I expect the team to lose, I might be taking the other side. So that happens a lot as well. But that is some great advice from one of the best out there, Ralph Michaels. So you might have a best bet coming on. I think you told me Washington versus Michigan State, where Michigan State is about a 16-point dog. Total on this game is 58. Lay it on us, Ralphie. What do you got?
Listen, I've read some things and, the coach is going to be back and Dan Antonio's now part of the team and they're going to be thrilled for this. Listen, if you're Michigan State, you've gone through so much crap on this team. I think they throw in the white towel halfway through the first quarter. I love Michael Penix. I love Kalen DeBoer. When DeBoer was the OC at Fresno State, I loved him. He went to become the OC at Cincinnati. Then he went to Fresno to be the head coach. Then he moved here. I mean, we have Penix that, is a legitimate Heisman quarterback, 73%, a YPA of 11.0. You've played Boise and Tulsa. So your average score is 50-15, and you're one of the rare teams that have played 2 FBS foes. Now, Tulsa was without their top 2 quarterbacks last week, so we can't take much into that. The Washington defense does concern me a bit. We've had some big scores, but when I look at Washington and I break them down, you have to look at the first half scores, because against Tulsa, they had a 22-3 lead at half. They had held Tulsa to 168 yards, and they gave up a couple plays in the second half that were long plays. Boise, the same thing. Am I concerned that they only rushed 4.5 yards per carry and under 100 yards per game? Yes, I am. But Michigan State's played Central Michigan and Richmond. I think they are completely overrated as far as those numbers go. Their sack numbers, they had 10 sacks, including 7 against Richmond. They're not going to be able to blitz Penix because he's so good at taking the blitz and sending them out. This Washington team's playing with confidence, It's a coach I like. It's a quarterback I like. If Michigan State is in the game early, yeah, I could see them playing and saying it's us against the world. The way Washington has started, I think they get out quick. I'm not afraid to lay the 16. I saw a 16.5 pop out up there. To me, they can get it done on the road.
Well, there you go. Laying the wood. Look at that. Road chalk in a Power 5 game of two teams that are not supposed to be bad. -16. That is a big statement, Ralphie. I will be rooting for you this weekend for sure, man. Wow. I can't believe the demise of Michigan State. I don't even know where I'm right on, because my number is 14, but I couldn't bet Michigan State. You know, it's almost like, how much do I have to adjust because of the Mel Tucker and the dysfunction and what the heck's going on over there? And Michael Penix, they owned him last year. I remember Michigan State being road chalk last year when they went to Washington and got blown out here. Kalen DeBoer is a serious coach. He's probably quickly entering my top 5, man, if he's not already there in my mind, right? I think that Washington's a fantastic team, and they're going to be fun to watch. And I do have Washington as a sleeper to win the Pac-12 this year. So loving Washington and love the play. Well, there's our best bets. We have Kansas State -4.5, and we have Washington at -16. Let's do a little hodgepodge since we have a little time, Ralph. Let's just pick a game, man. I'll pick one right now, and you can keep looking here. I'll try not to bore people too much. But why don't we go with BYU Arkansas? I find this interesting because Arkansas really handled this team in BYU last year. But now Arkansas is only laying 8 points. You know, and just kind of looking at this, I passed on this game when I was doing my, prep. This wasn't my top 20 where I kind of go in and see if I can find some angles because it's kind of off. But one thing I will say is Arkansas was really underwhelming their last game. BYU, I don't know what to make of them yet either. Very unknown for me on this side. Maybe you have something for this game. The total's pretty low at 47.5 for a game that went way over, if I remember right, last year, Ralph.
Yeah, well, you look at Arkansas this year. You know, Sam Pittman in his 4th season now. They returned only 4. They returned only 4 starters on the offensive side. So getting 379 yards, that has to be the most misleading box score there's been this year, Kiev. Against Western Carolina, they gained 379 yards and they put up 56 points. So you want to go points per yard. That's not a bad way to go. Kent State, am I concerned that they only had 308 yards against Kent State? Yes. They ran 172 times, 3.8 yards per carry. I watched bits and pieces of that. Now, I will say this. They could have scored a lot more. But what Sam Pittman did is Kent State had 6 and 7 players in the box, and he still ran the ball 45 times and only passed the ball 19 times. If he wanted to run some screens or really wanted to hit some quick hitters, he could have. So this is one offense that I think is much better than they've showed on paper. You know, Western Carolina, Kent State, BYU all at home, and then they go to LSU and play A&M and play Ole Miss. So I think he is playing sly. Maybe he opens it up a little bit more this year. As far as BYU goes, Slovis, all these USC quarterbacks that are transferring around the world now. Of course, you have Keaton Slovis, and I thought he would do better than his start so far. 65% completions, a 4-1 ratio. But Southern Utah, BYU only ran the ball 23 times for 46 yards. That's at home against Southern Utah. Sam Houston, they ran for 3.3 yards per carry. So the only way I could play is looking at an Arkansas defense that has held their 2 very weak foes to 1.4 yards per carry and 9 sacks against a BYU team that's played nobody, and Slovis has been clean. They have not allowed a sack. I think that changes this week. So even though it's a low total, if Arkansas does get the lead, I think Sam Pittman just keeps running the ball. So I lean Arkansas, and I would lean under first half in this situation again.
I like that. KJ Jefferson is just going to run the ball and just not let them back in. Now, yes, it's funny looking at some of the stats. I mean, there's both schedules ranked so bad because Kent State is so bad. But, the reason I asked that they were so underwhelming score-wise against Kent State, but you pointed out a few reasons why that could have been a little bit misleading. But maybe this is also why the spread is down a little bit lower. I just had more of a tougher time with Slovis, trying to power rate this BYU team who played Sam Houston State and won 14-0. Looks like Sam Houston is one of the slower teams with a decent defense, but Southern Utah, 41-16 against Southern Utah should have been a little bit better than that, in my opinion, as well. So this is probably all SEC or nothing, and they're going to be definitely psyched up for this game. So I find that interesting. Do you want to pick out a game for this week?
No, you throw out one more, and I'll talk about whatever you bring up.
All right. Well, let's see if we can dig deep here and find something interesting. Well, this is Pittsburgh versus West Virginia is kind of interesting just because of, what happened last week. Pittsburgh losing outright. That was pretty disgusting. We can talk about that one. There's not a lot of other big games. It's like you could just pick Hawaii, Oregon, Florida, Atlantic, Clemson. Like we said, this is not a massive week where we're going to get those big ranked teams against each other. So let's talk about West Virginia and see if they can hang a little bit with Pittsburgh. I thought they hanged a little bit last year for a while, didn't they?
Yeah, it's obviously the rivalry back, and that means a lot. You look at Pittsburgh. They take care of Wofford. They lose to Cincinnati, which certainly I was shocked at. And yeah, they gained 217 yards against Wofford on the ground. But I thought Cincinnati clearly, I did not expect them to be that solid on defense. So was that Pittsburgh playing poor? I mean, when you throw up 32 passes and you only gain 179 yards, your YPA is going to be pretty damn bad. I look at it as I don't want to play Pittsburgh on the road. I'm not a big fan of new quarterbacks and playing on the road in the first road game against a Power 5 team. Now, Jurkovic is obviously not a new quarterback, but he's new to the Pittsburgh system, with this. As far as West Virginia goes, the loss of Penn State, they were in that game early. Penn State scores a couple late touchdowns to get the cover and the over in that game. And I'm not a Green fan. We saw them bring their backup in a couple times already this year. It's a game that I am going to lean under again. Pittsburgh ran the ball 29 times against Cincinnati. West Virginia against Duquesne ran the ball 49 times. First road starts against Power 5 teams. I'm going to sound like a record, Kiev. If I'm going to look at anything, I'm going to look at under in the first half, and this is another situation where I think they do. West Virginia's defense, again, they gave up 478 yards against Penn State, but playing Penn State at night on the road in the first game of the season, I can forgive that and expect better things now.
Well, they're also more in that game until the end, Their defensive success rate now, we can't really go by stats like I say, but still, still ranks third in success rate. They're doing some good stuff. Their defensive line certainly looks better so far in the early stats. Obviously, this stuff, these metrics, passing success rate and line yards and stuff, this comes to fruition more week 4, week 5 anyway, But you're right. The state strength schedule is pretty close, and this could be definitely a rushing game for sure. Being so close to pick here, it's just very interesting to me. I think this look-ahead line was Pittsburgh certainly favored at West Virginia. Now it's kind of went down after Pittsburgh lost to Cincinnati. But then again, Cincinnati's been a good program. Sure, they lost their coach Fickle, but those kids are playing with honor and know they lost their coach and want to at least start out good. And they are now in the Big 12 too. So we have to start respecting some of those teams that moved up as well. Fascinating game. It's going to be interesting. We'll see what the coaches do here for sure. So just wanted to throw that one out there. But before we go, anything in the NFL that caught your eye this week that you might be playing?
A little early in the NFL week for me, but there's a couple things I want to keep you aware of. We talked about some trends and angles for college football. I have a couple I want to mention in the NFL. And again, if you follow me on Twitter, or I'll tell you what, even better, Kiev, I do a trends and angles segment on our Wagertalk Bet On It show every day. If you go to my homepage, I now have a PDF with all the trends and angles and all the games it applies to for that week for college and NFL. So the shortcut is wt.buzz/RM. But how about this? Since 2017, if you look at NFL game number 2 only, if you won as a home favorite in game 1, you are only 32.4% against the spread in game 2. The NFL is a league of adjustments. It's very difficult to win your first 2 games of the year. So that is just taking every NFL game won. That one game won as a home favorite since 2017. They're 32.4% against the spread. And if you lost game 1 as a home dog, you are 65.2% against the spread. So don't think in the NFL, oh, this team looks so good, I want to bet on them, or this team lost as a home dog, I want to fade them. It's been the exact opposite. And I'm going to give you 2 more situations that I lean with these systems. I'm not sure if they're going to be plays. When you're playing an NFL game and you're trailing by 9 or more at halftime, you're going to go into halftime. You're going to get the motivational speak. You're going to come out in the 3rd quarter. And obviously, you're going to play very well the 3rd and 4th quarter if you trailed by 9 and you end up winning the game. Going all the way back since 2012, when an NFL team was trailing by 9 or more at half and they won the game, they are only 38.5% the next week, like the Jets. If they trailed by 9.5 and won the game at home, they're 29.5% against the spread. And this also applies to the Jets. If you were trailing by 9.5, by 9 or more at the half, you won the game at home, and now you're on the road, you're 27.9% ATS. That system says to fade the New York Jets and play on Dallas this week. Obviously, now with the quarterback situation, that line is a little more inflated. And then the last one, how about this? Starting game 1 against a division foe is tough. If you lose that division game and have another division game on deck in week number 2, like Cincinnati, they lost to Cleveland, they're playing Baltimore. Indy lost to Indy lost to Jacksonville, now they're playing Houston. Carolina lost to Atlanta, now they're playing New Orleans. Since the year 2000, teams that lost game number 1 against a division foe and are playing game number 2 against a division foe have gone 83.3% against the spread in game number 2. That's one of the strongest statements that makes complete sense to me. That says play on Cincinnati, Indy, and Carolina. And how about this? Those teams that lost straight up, the average line in game 2 was plus 0.8. So they were basically plus 1 point per game. Straight up, Kiev, those teams have won 80.6% of the time. So if you have a situation like a dog, sprinkle some on the money line if they're in that role, because they've won 80.6%. They've covered 83.3%. I don't think I've ever seen a straight up record with an average line of being a dog like that in that situation. So to me, it makes total sense. And, you know, when you have to start 2 division games in a row and you lose the first, there's a hell of a lot of motivation in week number 2.
So Carolina is that dog that you mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, plus 3.5, that's the sprinkle side, because Cincy and Indy are kind of favorites right now. But still, but according they cover too. But the dog angle looks pretty amazing for the winning outright. I believe you said something like 80% or something winning outright.
80.6% straight up. And the average line was plus 0.8. So the average line, they were an underdog. So, you know, I like the Saints coming in. Fortunately, I used the Saints on the money line week 1 because it was a very cheap money line relative to the 3-point line. So I did get a win on that. But that will keep me off of it. And the other thing you got to remember is, as bad as Carolina looked, listen, when you're a rookie quarterback starting game one and you're starting on the road, like Houston, like Carolina, it's going to be so much different from game one to game two, the leaps and bounds you make. So you almost have to take Carolina's stats game one and put an asterisk on it with the 14 points they scored at Atlanta. And I thought the Saints, to me, I like the Saints. They missed Kamara. Remember, Kamara's out the first 3 weeks. They couldn't run the ball without him, and it made all the difference in the world in that offense. So to me, that situation kept me off. I'm not going to play Carolina, but I thought about playing the Saints, did some of this work, and them playing on the road now, Derek Carr first road game, and the offense line struggling without Kamara certainly keeps me off of a situation.
I liked what you said, because I was considering the Saints for many reasons. I was a little off in the power ratings. I have the Saints a little bit higher than the spread right now. I was down in Carolina coming in from preseason. I thought that they're completely discombobulated still. And but this is just one of those situations where the angle's just screaming at you 80%. You do not want to go against 80%, man, because I mean, 80% just on the money line is, I'll tell you in 1 second, minus 400, right? So I mean, why would you want to go against that? That is scary stuff. Well, Ralph, what's not scary is your great knowledge and your amazing plays and gifts that you give everybody in the weekend. Such a great follow on Twitter, amazing stats that you share for free. Where could our listeners and viewers get your great information and plays?
Again, at CalSportsLV, my Twitter. And there's two things I want to tell you. Go to the website. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. The quick link to my page is wt.buzz/RM. So WT for Wagertalk, buzz/RM. There's two things. My son and I did an NFL betting guide, the 25 biggest NFL betting mistakes and myths busted or supported. How teams do off back-to-back division games, teams in division sandwiches, teams that are playing a second straight home game, second straight road game. You know, Kiev, if I said to you, if I went to a bar and said, which is a better ATS record, NFL teams playing a second straight home game or NFL teams playing a second straight road game? Second straight road game in the NFL is actually 9% better ATS than home teams. Teams off a bye, home favorites off a bye have been miserable. But if you're a home favorite the week before a bye, it's been very successful. So 25 trends and angles, that guide is absolutely free. And then check the Bet On It weekly stats. Those are angles that apply only to this week's games. It lists all the angles, all the ATS records, and all the teams it applies to in both the NFL and college football.
Wonderful stuff. Thank you so much for sharing that great information, Ralph. Love having you on the Odds Breakers. You've been such a longtime friend of ours. I hope you win all your bets this weekend. Enjoy yourself watching the games.
Thanks, Kiev.